Hikaru Nakamura moves to 5 points to 2 for Hans Niemann. And Hikaru, he needed to be crisper, said Magnus when he was on the show. And it feels like that game was as crisp as it gets.
I mean, a lot of people are here on site watching from home. For entertainment purposes, this has been plenty entertaining. That game was also plenty instructive. Maybe Hikaru's best positional game, maybe his best game of these live SEC finals thus far. That was really well done.
And now we're back to where we left off. I mean, Hikaru keeps playing this from the black side. Hans had a slight advantage in their game a couple ago. And now F6, Hikaru Nakamura candidates preparation. It looks very weird, that pyramid pawn structure, C7 to E5 and G7 to E5. But Danya, the light squares, those feel like they're whites for the taking, and yet this is a justified opening. The engine backs it up.
Well, I thought I saw Hikaru in front of the Louvre. There's that there's that big pyramid there, so he's taking some inspiration. But against Jan Nepomniachtchi in the candidates, right, he was orienting toward the D6, D5 pawn break. I think that F5 is the more natural pawn break. This is what he's going for. But again, very cagey chess. Hikaru is not forcing anything. He likes the position to be closed. But he also needs to do something, because rook D1 is coming. The pawn on D6 is tender. And Hans is definitely not waiting for Hikaru to choose a pawn break. H5 essentially traps the knight and leads to a disastrous loss of a pawn.
It's those superfluous knights. Once again, the knight on E7, it takes the path, the retreat from the knight on G6. And so H5 is a big threat. Oh, God. Yeah, that is how sometimes I play and regret it as soon as I do it. But now H5 can be played.
And then H6.
Exactly. You just use that pawn as a battering ram. You just go right after the black king. You're prying open the dark squares. And if H6 is played and black plays, say, G5, you're definitely thinking about sacrificing a piece on the square.
Oh, absolutely. And I might not even be thinking about that sack. I might be doing it and then regretting it later. But we saw Ali Reza winning a game against Hikaru with that pawn on H6 that creates these long-term attacking potential. As Hans makes a more cagey, more patient move with knight H4, maybe he thinks that H6 by Hikaru is impossible due to bishop takes H6. Maybe he's also right about that. But Hikaru says, you took your eyes away from the center for a second. I'm going to make you regret it.
And this is how you typically defend against a flank attack. You strike back in the center, and G6 is the only move. It's also a very natural move. G5, bishop takes G5. That looks too scary, even if it didn't work, but it does, that you wouldn't play it. So G6 makes perfect sense. What else could Hikaru be considering here? Because I don't know if I would even think about a single other move.
Knowing Hikaru, he's looking at moves like knight G8. I've seen him play these types of moves against me. It's not that we've ever played. Maybe he wants to ignore the situation on the king side, pretend his king is perfectly safe. I don't find either of these options appealing. Maybe in a bullet game, maybe he worried about something after G6? Bishop G5 there is no longer effective. I'm pretty surprised.
He's just seemingly wasting a lot of time at this point. It's not to waste the overall match clock, excuse me. And we know with his experience, he finds those moments where I can just sit and waste that match clock, tick, tick, tick. We'll get closer and closer to the eventual bullet and the end of the match. But here it seems like he's really thinking. He stared up. Like he just looked at the ceiling.
Whoa!
And he goes G5.
And I was going to pull up an analysis board and show why this loses. Maybe Hans Niemann will show us why this loses, or Hikaru will show us why it doesn't. But if we bring up an analysis board anyway, just to quickly show why the other knight could not have gone to G6, it's because the queen, that's all the attacking force you need as it zigzags its way toward the lolly mate. Obviously, Hikaru puts the other knight on G6. Now the G7 square is defended. But Robert, I saw a move like E takes D5, and I stopped calculating because just look at black center. It's getting pulverized, and white has plenty of attacking firepower. Hans, he starts with a check on F6, and he goes for a different approach. He takes on G6. Knight takes is impossible, so Hikaru takes back with the H-pawn. But was it necessary to clarify the situation, and doesn't that make black's defensive task just a little bit easier now? E takes D5, C takes D5, and then queen F7 is possible? Yeah, that's a weirdly impulsive decision by Hans there to give that check on F6.
It's much easier to defend this from the black side because the H7 square is a square the king could actually jump forward to in some of these positions to protect the G6 pawn. So yes, E takes D5, we see that's the only move that keeps the advantage for white, but the advantage, even if it's played, is quite slight. And the players, they don't think in terms of, am I 0.9 better? They think, is this attack going to work? Do I have a bailout option? And after bishop takes D5, there is bishop takes G6, that actually is getting closer and closer to the black king. But one idea that black may have in some positions is rook D6. Like, that is going to be a nice saving move along the 6th rank.
That was excellently spotted by you. I'm just going to show one very cool idea. If instead Hikaru had tried queen f7, let's get the queen trade in. There was this move, probably other winning moves, but queen g7 check is just a cool trick after the trade. Both minor pieces are hanging, so that was out of the question. But let's get back to the game. Bishop d5, rook e5, and queen f7. Now, very effective. We can see the dark squared bishop. All hands on deck here for Hikaru. I'm still terrified for his king safety. I'm looking at moves like knight h5. If I'm Hans, he needs to stay hands-on in this attack. And he's also got a lot of pawns, a lot of Hans for the sacrifice piece, Robert. Important not to forget that. He doesn't need to burn all of his bridges. I'm procrastinating because I'm trying to count how many pawns he has. I think it's 3.
You are correct. It's 3 pawns, but there's one pawn that's great in the attack, but bad later in the game. It's that h6 pawn. You went to highlight it. You know exactly where I was going. Because with the queens off the board, and say the rook's getting traded as well, black will king h7, king takes h6. This is why we tell newer players especially not to overextend pawns. It's great for the attack. It threatens queen g7 checkmate if you can distract the black queen. But if the heavy pieces come off, immediately black will go and capture that pawn.
And the h6 pawn could be bad in the middle game for another reason. It's something you pointed out. The black king now has a hiding spot on h7. Again, it's like the umbrella. If this pawn didn't exist, it wouldn't be great here, but it would also have prevented the black king from escaping through the H file, because that file would have been wide open. So what is Hans deciding between? Obviously, he can drop the queen back. He's definitely not going to take on f7 unless he feels the attack is really fizzling out. Knight h5, I keep looking at that move. It's kind of cute, but I think queen g5 is kind of better than that, because rook e7 is a threat, and Hikaru cannot hold on for a single second. Knight e6, Robert, and rook takes e6.
Well, rook takes c6 does make sense. At first, I was like, what is that? But the point is that you want to take on g6 next and go right after the black king. I think the tricky part about this variation is rook e6.
Let me put this on the board.
Let's analyze this. Queen takes 6 and bishop takes g6. It looks like the black king just slides away. So where is
bishop f5 maybe first? And you spotted that well before me. But let's say I go queen to d6. And Hans has found rook e6.
Oh, my goodness. Will he find the follow-up? Because this looks, I mean, like black is about to hold, but there could be some bishop f7 with queen g7 mate coming and knight f5 bringing more firepower into the action. This is just not easy to go forward. Let's go to the live game.
Yes.
If we can.
And he's found both of these moves.
I mean, Hans, when he is in the flow, he is such an incredible player.
And bishop f5. This is the double exclam move. The computer's wrong. Because if he had taken on g6 immediately, in this very position, the black queen would have been on e6 instead of on d6, and you wouldn't have had the ability to jump the knight into the attack with tempo. This is what Grandmaster level attacking chess boils down to, Robert. And he found knight f5. Can he find the finishing touch? That cherry on top of the Shirley Temple. What is it? How do you finish this? Rook e1?
This is exactly where, when you see the engine, it can be misleading. Because it says +5. It looks like white's winning. It's sky high. But then you have to find the knockout. Rook e1 looks like a great move. Bring that last piece into the attack. As you're pointing out, knight e7, move the bishop away from g6. Get a knight to g6. But you start seeing ghosts sometimes in these positions, like rook d7. You're covering the 7th rank. And he plays knight e7, and the engine doesn't like it.
And queen e5. This is what Hans is so attracted by. But that bishop on a7, I pointed out a long time ago, it has lain dormant for so long. Is it time for it to join the defense? It does slice off the rook on a8. Maybe Hikaru can take on e7. That looks way too terrifying. It helps white's rook in, and he does play bishop e8. Oh, queen f6.
Oh, that deserves a triple exclam.
A queen sacrifice, a deflection, and a back rank mate. And it was important that he sliced off the rook.
Wow, that was a sick game from Hans Niemann.